Celo Connect. Is everyone ready to spill the tea with NFTs? I know that was a bad pun, but I'll take it. Welcome to the NFTs with Purpose panel. My name is Mashiat. I lead the NFT initiative at Celo. And I work with my colleague very closely, Kimberly Dara, who unfortunately couldn't be here. And we've been building out the NFT ecosystem for the past 4 months, ensuring that we're able to provide the right resources to our creators, our builders, and our artists so that they can succeed on our platform. So before I jump into our panel, I kind of wanted to give a little bit of a backstory as to where Celo NFTs started. So it started all the way back in 2017 when I was a college student, and at that time, CryptoKitties came out. And being an avid cat lover, I needed to mint my very first golden Horatio with my top ramen money. And at that time, I didn't quite really appreciate, how NFTs and utility could have been a breakthrough. But it's so crazy to see the growth of the space in the past few years, in the past few months even. In 2020, the NFT market was valued at $250 million. And in 2021, in just 12 months, it's grown to over $10.7 billion. That is insane. And one of the reasons why it's like that is because NFTs actually serve as a tool that really caters to humanity's most primitive desires, and that is to actually belong and to find connection. And that's why we've seen so many artists, traders, patrons, creators, collectors come together and create and connect and build all of these amazing platforms and communities together in the NFT space. But at the same time, it's not without its controversies, right? Like when we look at the NFT industry, and if you look at the stats, you can actually see that there's actually a very few number of large players. In fact, only 10% of users account for 85% of all transactions. In addition to that, creator survivability is actually quite difficult. Creators have to face a very steep learning curve. Many creators, artists don't know how to use wallets. And in lieu of that, they also have to learn how to mint their collections, which can take a lot of financial constraints, technical capacity. And they also have to, once they launch their collection, to ensure its survivability, not only do they have to keep on creating new drops, but they also have to manage the communities, which can lead to burnout. In addition to that, there is the climate issue, which I think is going to be very prevalent in our panel today. In fact, NFT transactions on a proof-of-work platform actually take up 260 kilowatts of energy, which is equivalent to a US household using energy for over 9.05 days. That's insane. One NFT transaction leads to that much energy consumption. But that's why we're here at Celo NFTs. We're here to set the stage to becoming the NFT platform for the 99%. And what does that mean? That means that we go beyond JPEGs. We are looking at leveraging our Celo mobile-first technology stack, our carbon-negative platform, our global audience, and our scalable network to make sure that we can create NFTs for good. The first pillar of our NFT thesis is that we're going to be looking at regenerative climate solutions that protect our Earth. So what does this look like? This can look like tokenized assets that are backed by land conservation deeds. It can look like plastic offsetting. It can look like carbon offsetting. It can look like collectives and communities that have a collective vision to protect our Earth, coming together and raising the funds to make that happen. Our second pillar is creator prosperity. So we've partnered up with Tatum, Kiko, Alades, the Climate Collective, to build out open source pathways and tools for all of our creators and our builders so that they can jumpstart their NFT career on top of Celo without that much financial constraints, without any sort of technical capacity. They can learn on the go, and we'll be here to support them. And of course, we are a global network. We are in over 158 different countries with over 2.7 million users. That means that there are users that have other needs as well. As much we love art NFTs, we have so many amazing art NFT marketplaces, and at the same time, we're also building NFTs with real-world utility. This looks like community commerce programs, discount rewards programs, loyalty programs, NFTs that basically serve as memberships and provides access to different forms of utility, and we want to make sure that that is accessible to the 99% around the world. In the past 3 months, Kim and I are so excited to see the meteoric growth of our own NFT ecosystem. We have had over a 300% increase in the projects in our space. And some of these projects are here, and they're working tirelessly to ensure prosperity for creators, and at the same time develop state-of-the-art regenerative solutions that will protect our most important resource, the Earth. So without further ado, I would love to introduce my panelists. Today we have Sophia Li from Steward, who is a multimedia journalist who has been featured in Vogue, CNN, and she has also been named as one of the top climate communicators of 2022 by Harvard. She is the co-founder of Steward, who is building a Web3 collective on top of Celo that focuses on climate prosperity. We have Gibber, who is the CEO of Flow Carbon. She is working tirelessly to ensure transparency in the voluntary carbon market. We also have André from Plastiks, who is closing the loop between plastic production and NFTs, and he's basically working in this really cool space where he's backing up NFTs with receipts from waste management companies and making sure that we can do plastic offsetting, which is an alternative to carbon offsetting. And lastly, of course, not the least, we have the amazing Janice, who is the CEO of EQ.Exchange, and she is restructuring the industry norms in the music industry to ensure that creators have the power over their own prosperity. So welcome. Thank you for being here. I wanted to kind of start off the panel by having you guys go a little bit more in depth about what you do, what your platform is working towards, a little bit about your background. So Sophia, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Thank you, Mash. Hello, everyone. So my name is Sophia Lee, and I'm a journalist, and I focus primarily on the climate sustainability space. And Steward is a Web3 collective, and it first is a climate NFT project that, with every sale and resale, it directly funds the climate movement. And we like to say that Steward harnesses the power of the digital world to protect our physical world, because if we don't have a physical world, then we don't have a digital world. And I'll go more into Steward in a little bit. Yeah.
Good morning. Oh my gosh, I'm a loud talker, so magnified with the mic. I'm Gibber. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Flow Carbon, where we are tokenizing certified live carbon offset credits from the voluntary carbon market in order to fix a lot of the underlying systemic problems in the off-chain carbon market. Yeah, thanks. It's very exciting. We are leveraging NFTs in a couple of innovative ways, which I will go into later.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege to be on this panel. My name is André Vanyi-Robin, CEO and founder of Plastiks. Plastiks is a marketplace where artists, waste management companies, consumer brands, and consumers can work together to reduce waste in the environment. And we entered the NFT space to address the problems of transparency and lack of traceability in the waste management industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm Janice. I'm the founder and CEO of EQ.Exchange. EQ.Exchange was built to really solve what I saw as the most predatory lending system in the world, which is the music industry, because it's really a big giant bank. And I really felt that we needed to have a focus on bringing power, empowering artists to really not only own their own intellectual property, but to really be able to leverage it. When an artist comes to the end of their career, they really don't own their music. But it actually happened on day one. So we really focused on how can we bring capital into the hands of those creators, but really to create a more robust focus around how they can really own their own property. And so we really focus on that component of it.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for being here. I wanted to kick off the panel, by talking about what sort of issues you guys were seeing in the space and why you thought NFTs were, a solution for the problems that you were seeing. I think we've seen like NFTs obviously have this sort of huge shift in our industry, mostly with art, right? We've seen a lot of traders, a lot of patrons, a lot of artists come on board, but all of you are working in a different niche with NFTs, primarily creators and climate. So when you guys were looking at the landscape, what sort of problems did you notice, and how did you kind of reconcile with the fact that, maybe NFTs are a possible solution here? Sophia, do you want to start?
Sure. I'll start because basically I in the climate space, I would always hear these two really consistent problems. And maybe I'll ask the audience, for example, can you raise your hand if, when you donate to a climate nonprofit, if you donate once? Raise your hand if you just donate once. And raise your hand if you donate consistently, like it's every month, or, okay, so a little bit less. So with climate nonprofits, they basically say that donations happen usually majority on a one-off time, like people would usually donate one-off scale. And most of the donations will actually go to the big greens, like Greenpeace, Sierra Club. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the smaller organizations, nonprofits that are working conservation, indigenous groups, and environmental justice groups get less than 10% of all donations. And so Steward is tackling, one, the donation aspect, because with every sale and resale, it's a consistent donation to these groups. And two, we're tackling getting funding to these climate organizations that aren't the Greenpeaces of the world, and also getting their story out there. That's another thing that they kept saying was a problem. And being on-chain helps with both of those.
Amazing. And why would you say, how would you think NFTs can enable that mechanism?
Because of smart contracts, every time there's a sale or resale, the climate nonprofit is always being considered into the equation, whereas with anything else, it would just be a one-time thing.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Dana, do you want to kind of go a little bit more about the issues you guys were seeing in the carbon space and the carbon market, and how you're thinking about NFTs as a possible solution?
Sure. So we'll talk about the big problem first, and then the specific problem. The big problem is a problem that I think we all experience, which is the destruction and eradication of our natural land assets. For some reason, as a global society, we are spending hundreds of billions of dollars on decarbonization at this point, but have not managed to secure our natural carbon sinks, which are our natural capital, as we've been calling it here at this conference, our natural land assets. And the reason for that is because there are tremendous economic incentives in destroying our natural assets, and very immature, nascent economic incentives for securing them and keeping them standing. The carbon offset market is designed to address that problem. It creates financial viability and incentives in keeping our land assets standing, our trees standing, our roots in the ground. And the biggest problem the big problem is that the underlying market infrastructure in the carbon offset market is broken. It's non-transparent, it's illiquid, it's primarily over-the-counter, a lot of things that can be solved with tokenization. That's great. And that's what Flow Carbon is addressing holistically with our fungible token, but we're not talking about fungible tokens on this panel. The specific problem, and where NFTs play a really important role, is this. If you are a person who identifies a project that you can do in nature that is preserving a natural asset, you can purchase a large swath of carbon-dense rainforest, for example. It is tremendously financially intensive to do these kinds of projects. And the only financial revenue stream that you can get often takes a period of years to recover in the form of offsets. So offsets solve the problem, but there's a temporal lag in between the upfront capital that you have to lay down to secure a land asset, employ people to watch your land asset as rangers and fire marshals, et cetera, as you get your project certified with the globally recognized certification bodies and get issuances of carbon credits, which you can then sell to recover some of this capital. So big time lag and big capital expenditure. And that's where NFTs can be a massively innovative solution. Why? This is something that Flow Carbon has been working on for a while and actually unveiled this week in a very exciting way. There's a mechanism called forward contracts, which we're all familiar with, and which play in the carbon markets insofar as they enable project developers who are doing these projects that are preserving our land assets, for example, to recover some capital in the form of forward contracts before they get issuances of their carbon credits that they can sell in the spot market. And the problem is, even to get to a forward contract state is very costly, and there's no financing available for these projects in the off-chain world. A carbon offset, which is the revenue instrument, is, again, illiquid and non-transparent, and so it's very difficult to underwrite any kind of financing into these projects. What Flow is doing, in partnership with a protocol called Centrifuge, which specializes in tokenizing and bringing on-chain real-world assets, is taking these forward contracts from carbon projects, creating NFTs, because inherently a contract, as a recovering lawyer, there's nothing more non-fungible to me than a contract, right? Each one is one of one. So you take a forward contract from a carbon project that enables somebody to pay in advance for issuances that are soon to come and allows these projects to be funded much sooner. You bring it on chain in the form of an NFT, and it can then be used as collateral where the project developer can borrow against it for the first time ever. This is a major financial innovation, very specific, that solves a major financing bottleneck at the project development stage. And so that is the specific problem in our market that NFTs have proven to be a super innovative tool to address.
Amazing. Thank you for that in-depth kind of explanation as to how the carbon market works and how NFTs can play such a strong place as a solution. André, do you kind of want to give a little bit more about Plastiks? I know you also have a really cool announcement for our audience here.
Thank you very much. Yes, I do. The big announcement is Plastiks is now live on Celo today. Thanks to the fabulous leadership of the co-founders Trim and Danielle, who are sitting in front here. And we're so grateful to be part of the ecosystem of such a philosophical fit with Plastiks. Everybody wants to save the world. Nobody wants to pay for it. And Plastiks was born because the waste management industry makes money two ways. They make money collecting waste, and then they make money sorting that waste and selling part of that waste as a feedstock to recycling industry so that new packaging can be made from recovered materials. In that activity, we decided that we could provide the waste management companies with a third revenue source by converting their invoices into NFTs. If you're selling something, it means that you're paying taxes. If you're paying taxes on something you sold. If you sold it, that means that you had it. So the invoice is a guarantee that a certain amount of plastic and a certain type of plastic has been recovered and is not gone into the environment. As a result, we have created the NFT as a recovery guarantee. Now, the biggest problem that we're addressing is lack of transparency in the waste management industry and traceability. We know life is hard. We're all working, we get up in the morning, we're bombarded by CNN, by all news. The world is going down in horrible situation. We want to do something. By midday, we are reminded of the work that we need to do. By the afternoon, we're reminded of the obligations that we have. And when we come at night and we have to pick up the garbage that we have supposedly been sorting at home for an entire week and go down, we ask ourselves, does it make a difference? Does it make a difference that I've sorted my type of plastic from my carton, from my aluminum? To answer that question, Plastiks was born. Basically, all plastic produced on the planet has to be accounted for. All plastic has to have a first name and a last name. So Plastiks is a marketplace where consumers, consumer brands, waste management companies, and artists can come together to reduce waste in the environment. Thank you.
Amazing. And congratulations on your launch. I think there's going to be a call to action for everyone to try out the demo very soon. And last but not the least, Janice, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Janice, could you tell us a little bit more about EQ.Exchange? And I've had conversations with you, and those conversations have blown my mind away about the music industry. Yeah. I would love for you to share some of the insights of the problems that you've been seeing in your niche with the audience.
So, this is my third startup, and it took Celo and Sep for me to quasi come out of retirement to decide to do this. So, and I'm loving it. All the humans here, by the way, have been so fun and so kind. And like all of you, we just have to give you a big round of applause. The people here have been so awesome. So awesome. In my second startup was focused on mental health, and I ended up working a lot with musicians and celebrities. And often it really was interesting because it was a lot of women and a lot of women of color that would get very comfortable with me, and they would ask me to read their contracts. They knew I was the CEO, so I was like a closet healer, is what I say. By day, I was the CEO. Some of you were here at the retreat, so you know this to be true. And by night, I was really working with people on their healing journey. The thing that was most interesting was the torture that they felt when they had the aha moment, when they realized that they were a work for hire. And And what was most interesting to me, I always say that you should plan your exit on the day that you receive anything that is awesome, including your marriage, perhaps. I don't know. Just plan the divorce on the day when you're all in love. Just really makes it way better. So I've always been trained to look at a contract, but I always look at, like, how does it end? Like, how do you get out? The thing that was most interesting to me about the music side of it was there was really no exit. There was no, like, oh, 5 years, this is done. They were often 25-year contracts. It was often the fact that the royalties were lifetime. And the thing that really sort of triggered to me was the fact that really artists are like startups, and they need different types of capital at different points of their career. Now, how many people here have Spotify? Just hands up. Now, I'm going to ask you this question. You're going to say yes, but we all know it's not true. How many of you would really leave Spotify? Like, really leave it? If you could probably take your playlist with you, would you leave? That's probably a better question. The thing that was most interesting to me was, think of any artist you have loved. Just put them in your imagination. You've been at the concert, maybe coherent, maybe not. You've been rocking it out, and you think that artist up there is living this life. The day one of a contract, an artist loses 50% of what they own on day one, immediately. The average contract size that they get, it's called a cash advance. They get $50,000 to $100,000, kind of friends and family money, if you think about it. They lose the rights to that music immediately for their life. They have to then make 7 albums on average before they can even consider making music anywhere else. They then have to pay back everything that the so-called label does for them. The marketing that you see, the whole components of it that you see, they charge that back to the artist before the artist can actually start making revenue. So you've got a cash advance, you pay all of that back. So guess what? An artist has spent that $50,000 to $100,000 cash advance. So guess what they say? They're like, well, you're going to need more money. Here, let's give you another cash advance. So they take another cash advance, and then before they know it, it's now 85% of everything that they own is gone. So when you were looking at Spotify, and it's not really Spotify's fault per se, the labels struck up that deal, is about 80% of all of that subscription revenue goes to labels. So when you are playing that, it doesn't actually go to the artist, it goes to the label. Then the label decides when the artist should be paid, and the artist doesn't have any visibility into who's listened to their music and where. The thing that was most interesting, my partner is Ashanti, so she is dropping tomorrow. She is my partner. Ashanti explained this story, which I think is just something that I'd love for everyone to think about when you're listening to music, when you put that Spotify on, when you come and you look for opportunities to support artists. She always says we have to pay for the plastic. From a $15 CD, an artist makes 38 cents. They make 38 cents, of which they then have to pay for the plastic, they then have to pay for what's inside of it, and they have to pay for the marketing out of the 38 cents. Spotify pays 0.005 cents per stream. An artist has to have 1 million streams, and they make $5,000. So when you're listening to the music, look at how many times it's been played, and if it's not over 1 million, they've made less than $5,000. So that's why we made EQ.Exchange.
I think the crowd is just speechless. And I think it's all going to make us be a little bit more mindful and reflectful about, when the year end comes and we all get our Spotify, record. How many streams did you get, and is it actually going to the artist? So thank you for that. So I kind of wanted to have the first question be a little bit more geared towards climate, and then move on into the creator space. But regarding climate, all of you guys have decided to build on Celo. I wanted to kind of ask, what exactly about Celo's ecosystem attracted you to build your platform? And I think my second question, if you could please follow up with that, is something a little bit more philosophical. One thing, André, you mentioned, which resonated with me, was you can't. People want to do something about climate, but they don't want to pay for it. Right. And this is something that is very, very true, and it is a very hard problem to solve for. And I think particularly it's because people feel overwhelmed, right? It's like 7, 8 billion people on this world contributing. What am I going to do if is me recycling this Coca-Cola can really helping the world? So how are you guys also tackling that issue? How are you putting the power of climate change in the hands of the individual and making it, less overwhelming, making it more actionable? Please start. Any of you can start.
Sure. Great question, first of all. Why build on Celo? Why build anywhere else? Celo is, I think we all recognize over the last 24 hours, an incredible community, vibrant, enthusiastic, mission-driven, mission-aligned, and the community that we've been involved with, the Climate Collective, obviously. Shout out to the Climate Collective, they're amazing. Absolutely. This is just an incredible, unique, really singular community, and we're thrilled to be part of the Celo family. And so, for sure, that's why building on Celo makes sense. I would say people will pay for climate change. People feel a lot of climate anxiety. The market that we are in, it's called the voluntary carbon market. Literally, that's its official title, right? Voluntary. There is a soon-to-be $100 billion market that is driven not by regulation, but it's driven by pressure that stems from the trickle effects that start at the individual level. Corporates are spending hundreds of millions and soon-to-be hundreds of billions of dollars on carbon offsets because they are feeling pressure from investors, from Larry Fink, from consumers, from their employees, from their peers. And the result is they are making commitments to not only undertake internal reduction efforts that are super important to actually reduce their carbon emissions, but to then offset the delta. It is the voluntary market. It is driven by pressure by every individual. And so that's incredibly powerful, and it's manifesting in hundreds of billions of dollars that are going towards carbon offsets, which are the instrument that's financing planet-saving projects on the ground, many of which are nature-based projects, large-scale forest conservation, agricultural projects, et cetera, and a lot of tech-based projects also that are super meritorious. So I would say individuals in that way are having a major impact on funneling capital from corporates into the carbon offset market. But there's another component, and Flow is in the thick of it, which is activating the individuals to participate themselves. So there is tremendous untapped demand for each individual to be carbon neutral in our own right. And not just as individuals with our own activities, but we are now working with TV shows and movies that are going to be carbon neutral, events that are going to be carbon neutral. How? They have to start by being responsible with their emissions, but we're in a global industrial society, so obviously there's going to be carbon emissions. You offset all of the residual, and what that means, what does offset mean? It means that you're paying for the removal of carbon somewhere else. It's a beautiful concept, and it all stems from individual desire to make an impact and to participate. And so what Flow is doing with NFTs, what is the NFT unit that we have at Flow? We have a fungible token, which is our nature token, which represents a live carbon offset, which is the core of our ecosystem. It's what corporates, individuals, movies, events are buying to actually offset their carbon emissions. But every time that happens, you get cryptographic proof in the form of an NFT of the action that you've taken. What have been my offsets to date? How many tokens have I retired to date? As a corporate, as an individual, as a movie, as a show, as a cultural institution. We're working with museums and art galleries that are offsetting exhibits. And that cryptographic proof can be used in the same way that off-chain banners and rally cries are used. It is a symbol of your activity and your intention and your action that you've taken. And we have people embedding it in their profile pictures, putting it in their social handles, using it in all kinds of innovative ways as a symbol and a broadcast and a message of what they've done. So I would say individuals are absolutely willing and actually doing the hard work of transferring wealth from themselves into climate-saving action.
And I love that you type that into like the identity component as well with NFTs, which is like a very interesting niche that has a lot of exploration to do, because not only is that, as you mentioned, like a symbol of one's commitment to climate change, but also by broadcasting it publicly, you are putting some pressure on yourselves and holding yourself accountable by the public to continue to consistently contribute to climate change.
100%.
Yes.
Everyone can see it.
Absolutely.
And it's immutable.
André, please go ahead.
So Nozama was founded I founded it in early 2019. And the experience as a SaaS company made me say what I'm going to say now. Picture the vast majority of human beings going to the supermarket and confronted with the opportunity to buy toilet paper, to buy water, to buy milk. They have options. Buy this one and pay a little bit more and contribute to saving the planet, or buy this one because it's cheaper. The vast majority are going to buy the cheaper one. Companies in the waste management industry, in developing nations, in Africa, where we are working, in Latin America, please give a portion of your profit to the waste pickers in the street, pushing carts in Nairobi, collecting garbage, pushing carts in Mexico City, collecting garbage, or in Bogota, Colombia, and they're going to answer, we would love to. Well, can you do it? The microphone is not saying anything because there's silence. They won't do it. That is the reality. That is the reality in which we live in. So the NFT is basically created to create a new source of revenue to allow waste management companies to be forthcoming with their information. The only reason they will be forthcoming with the information is because they're going to make money. That's it. And then the NFTs to force 40% of that new revenue stream down into the field to be given to the people that are actually picking up to improve their livelihood. And how do you do that? How do you improve their livelihood with crypto? Celo is the solution for us in country, in Africa, through mobile payments. This is the main reason why. The second reason was, philosophically, people criticize NFTs because of its carbon footprint. Well, we can say with Celo, there is carbon neutrality. Those are the two main reasons why we decided to work with the Celo ecosystem. And again, we have to incentivize transparency and traceability. And this is the solution. If there's incentivization, if people can measure their impact, they will act accordingly. Thank you.
I'm just going to add into that from the other side as well.
Please go ahead.
I think the component of this is really interesting with Celo, because Celo's, the logo about it, or the component of it, is really prosperity for all. And one of the things I think when we talk about culture, I think we saw this in the United States, and I had a lot of clients that I was working with, a lot of people that are working with, really looking at women and people of color and how they drove culture. But when you actually look at a financial system, I call it the ring of fire, the Johnny Cash ring of fire. If you are below the ring of fire, the financial system as it's been built doesn't really benefit you. If you're a woman and a person of color, or you come from a specific country, you are below that ring of fire, which I say the profits at the top just get all burned up before they actually make its way through. It's built on that kind of a cascade. And when we think about culture and music and creativity, we have to look, I believe, at the Black community. We need to look at communities of color. We need to think about women. And then you look at the system and you realize, well, this financial system's not built for you. It has effed you over in every complete way. And so I chose Celo because I knew that artists were connected to the spirit, which means they're connected to the earth. I'm from Canada, and so our First Nations and Aboriginal communities, they were the first stewards of the climate. They called it the creator. They never took more. And I think that that's really important. And Celo thought about that in such a philosophical, mindful way of like, where we are in the world with our finances, our climate, and who are the people that really should drive that conversation. The last thing I'll say, when you put up the statistics that 10% of the transactions are coming from this small pocket of humans. I'm a woman, a Gen X woman, and so when I looked at all the buyers, no offense to the crypto bros, but I was like, well, these are a lot of white boys. Where are the women? Where are the people of color? Like, they need, what's going on? And that, for me, was the big trigger, where I was like, I came to Celo because of the philosophy, but we are looking at these communities. They drive culture. And so they need to own this space and be in this space. And that's the audience that we at EQ are focused on. We're focused on the people that don't have a wallet yet. We want them to get a wallet. We want them to be here because they drive culture and conversation.
I love that. Thank you. And thank you for also showing that connection, right, between climate, culture, community, how both climate and culture is all about restructuring the financial systems that we have, using the right incentive mechanisms, and putting the power in the hands of the individual so that we can make sure that minority groups can also prosper, creators from minority groups, creators that work with climate collectives can prosper as well. Sophia, do you kind of want to go a little bit more about why Steward chose Celo, and also a little bit more about, how Steward is putting holding the individual accountable for their climate action?
Yeah. To actually go off what Janice was saying is that in the climate space, oftentimes activists, politicians, anyone in the climate movement will say, we need new systems in place to solve the climate crisis, because the current systems that we have, capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, that has caused the climate crisis. And we often would say this new system, this new paradigm, it was almost like a hypothetical, idealistic thing until Web3 came around. But when Web3 came around, it was proof of work, it was highly energy intensive, and now that we have proof of stake, with Celo, it wasn't just about carbon neutrality and being carbon negative, it was also looking at how Celo operates on a foundational level. So we know that the climate crisis was largely caused by the global north, and the global south has to deal with the repercussions. Climate migration, a rise in temperatures, climate disasters on parallel scales. So, but when we look at any crypto company or any blockchain, it still benefits the global north because, let's say, for example, like your key phrases, they're all in English. The majority of the world doesn't speak English, and especially in the global south. Celo operates on where they don't give key phrases in English, it's a number base that's universal. So just like those minuscule details, that shows how universal it is and actually supporting the global south and the universe, the climate movement at large, no matter what language you speak. How Steward is making the climate crisis be an individual, have individual accountability is because if you look at the statistics, we basically think because of media news, we're very polarized in the climate space. We actually think that the thought is that we think that the majority of people are climate deniers, but statistically, climate deniers are less than 10% of people. In the U.S., it's even in the U.S. we have the most climate deniers, but it's still less than 10%. Outside the U.S., it's more. So the majority of people say yes, we know climate change is real. We don't deny that, but it's still far off in the future. We can't deal with it. It's too big to even process. Yeah. So what they are called are climate delayers, and more than 70% of the world's population are climate delayers. They believe that climate change is real, but yet they're not willing to do anything about it because it's just too much to handle. And what Steward is trying to do is bring an NFT that is dynamic, bring that emotional connection to the climate crisis. And what it means is that it's dynamic is that basically anytime there's a climate disaster, anytime there's a flooding, tsunami, heat waves, wildfire in that ecosystem, you see it happen in your NFT, and that brings this emotional connection. And instead of seeing this happen on the news as statistics, this becomes this emotional connection that you have with your NFT, which if you grew up in the 90s like myself, everyone had a Tamagotchi, you would water it, it was like your best friend, and you had a very emotional connection to your Tamagotchi. And an NFT can act the same, but then bridge the climate crisis. And as we always say, climate disasters isn't news, we need to be bridging those parallels and connecting those dots, and that's what Steward is doing.
Amazing, thank you for that. And that's been like really important to kind of understand, right? Like the climate delayers, I think. It's like a misconception that we as an industry have whole about the climate problem. When we're thinking about building NFTs for prosperity, which all of you are doing, as individual builders, but also as an ecosystem, what should we consciously look for, right? Like Sophia, you mentioned, like, there are so many inherent biases in the technology that we use. Like the recovery phases are all in English. That poses a barrier for many of the markets that we want to go into and face adoption. What are ways in which we as an entire ecosystem can consciously redefine and restructure to ensure prosperity for creators, for climate, for culture on top of Celo?
Everyone looked at me. I guess I'm the chosen one to answer that question. It's a difficult question, but I think the most important thing for people that I think it needs to be the message is for people to just take a bit of time being uncomfortable. My education and background is psychology. When you were saying about people do want to pay, what people don't know what to do is to change a habit.
Yes.
And so I think that we're all excited about this because we've taken the time to be uncomfortable and learn something that's quite complex and hard to understand. And I think we would all serve our communities better by really, bringing products to them that still are not so difficult to understand, but still pull into a user habit that someone is there. But I think we have to address some of the psychological underpinnings of why people change. And what is the motivation to change?
Yes.
That's the bigger philosophical question. And I think us as community and community leaders that have come to Celo, we've come with our individual verticals, but we all share a common problem, which is how does somebody motivate themselves to change a behavior? What does it take? And I think that's really, like when you were talking about delayers, I am a delayer. I am in that category. I'm like, why am I a delayer? What is at the root cause of that? And often it's fear. It's often doubt. It's hard to believe that this is beautiful and that this can work. That's hard for an imagination. Most people believe in fear. Most people believe that, well, we're all going to hell in a handbag anyway, so why don't I just put all my plastic in here?
Yeah.
The prevailing fear of that is really important, and so I think that all of us need to address that, and we need to do a better job, I think, as a community, really understanding that in the products that we offer, and addressing this sort of core root of that motivation.
Wow. I think you spoke a lot of truth. Yeah, and you're right. Like we do get hampered by fear as much as we love prosperity. Fear can sometimes overtake a lot of things, and that's why it's so important to collectively work together on these problems and tackle this problem through various avenues that all of you are doing. Since we're running a little bit low on time, and I do want to give the audience some time to ask questions, I think it would be great if you guys had any advice for other builders who are looking to get into the climate and the culture space, the creator space, to build on top of Web3, and if there's like any other way that folks can engage with your projects as well beyond this panel. Sophia, do you want to start?
Sure. So Steward actually launches next month, in end of May 2022.
Yes.
And thank you for the 3 claps. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that for other creators, I would say that right now the blockchain is decentralized, and that's incredible. But everything else is still centralized. The finance, the prosperity, the people using it, everything else is still very centralized. So I would say to creators is like, do anything you can to help make this technology and everything else in this ecosystem truly decentralized and infiltrate from within. If you told me 6 months ago I would be building NFT collection in climate space as a climate journalist, I would be like, F no, I would not be. But now I'm like, yes, because we have to infiltrate from within and create it, create the actual future that we want to be living in. So I would say the decentralization part.
Amazing. Dana?
I would say a few things. So I'm feeling incredibly optimistic, and I think it's because when you're in our market, which is the voluntary carbon market, and this harkens back to your previous question, it's because in our market, there's basically been a redefinition of prosperity and wealth, right? This is an entire $100 billion market that says we are voluntarily taking wealth in the form of money, fiat, now sometimes crypto, and burning it out of existence by buying carbon offsets that represent positive climate action, carbon abatement, and retiring them. So we're buying these live credits and then we're retiring them voluntarily because we care so much about this planet and about effectuating positive climate action as corporations and now as individuals and again as cultural institutions and as protocols that we are redefining wealth and transferring it into climate abatement, carbon abatement and positive climate action. And so we see this happening at an incredible rate, volume, and scale at Flow, and so I'm incredibly optimistic. And I would say at a very tactical level, since it was a tactical question, we're working with a lot of the projects and protocols in this room, but any individual, any protocol, any project, any company that wants to participate in this, wants to be carbon neutral or wants to offset an event or the flight that they took to get here, can use our GNT token, our primitive, as a means of effectuating that easily, transparently, immutably. And so if we're not already talking to you, that's something that you can do that's tangible, that's actionable, and that has a very clear and transparent real-world impact, predominantly in nature-based projects.
Thank you.
I would like to state that conservatism or conservatorship is a luxury of the wealthy. Survival is the condition of the most, of the masses. As creators, you should build solutions that are embedded in the actual act of surviving, of consuming, because you cannot stop consuming. The biggest power you can have is to choose wisely your products and services from companies that have proven their commitment to the environment. That is your power. So for you to choose, what do you need? You need data, you need to measure, you need to know that your choice will have impact, and you want to have emotion. You want to feel that you're related to and committed to a brand, committed to an image, committed to a cause. So I would encourage creators to work on that basis, on the basis of building models intricate to the continued consumption, but in a wise manner, in a sustainable manner. That's what I would propose.
I love that, because you're right, it is about survival. You know, in most of the world, we do live in survival, and I think that goes back to the motivation of pain, right? Where our pain points are. So EQ is live. Ashanti is my partner. Does everyone know who she is? She's pretty fantastic. She lost control of her music 20 years ago, almost to the day, right now. 20 years ago, her music she has not owned. The only way that she can take her music back is to re-record outside of the United States. So she came to Canada, and she is now re-recording all of her music at her own expense. And tomorrow is her first drop on EQ. It is already up there. There are 4 different levels. So I would ask the Celo community to send her a message of support. She is pioneering this for women and women of color. She's the first Black female artist to come in ownership. That was a requirement for me. I didn't just want to do her NFT. I wanted her to own and be part of the tech ecosystem to send a message to other Black women and Black girls. And it was very specific for me. So if you have a chance, please go to EQ.Exchange, buy her NFT. 1% of all of the NFTs is a requirement on EQ, go to charity. So the charities have wallets, we send that, it is an automatic payment for them. And she is going to be sharing in the royalties of her re-recorded music of some of her biggest hits of all time. So let's send her a message from Barcelona to her to really support her. Absolutely, because I think it's so important what she's doing.
Absolutely. Well, we got our orders. Head down to EQ, guys. Honestly, Ashanti's a legend. So thank you, Janice, Andre, Dana, and Sophia for coming onto the panel. We have run out of time, so they will be available on the floor for any questions. And next up, we actually have Janice's panel, which is about challenging industry norms in the music industry and the creator industry. So yes. All right, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the conference.